There are some lives that do not move in straight lines, but rather in circles of tragedy and triumph, as if fate itself has chosen them for a story too vast for one lifetime. Keanu Reeves was born into such a story. His name, which means cool breeze over the mountains in Hawaiian, sounds like a prophecy, a whisper of calm, a force that arrives quietly yet reshapes everything around it. And perhaps that was always meant to be his role. A presence both gentle and unshakable, an ordinary man who would carry the weight of extraordinary sorrow while still offering the world fragments of hope. Keanu Charles Reeves entered the world on September 2nd, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon. His father, Samuel Nowlin Reeves Jr., was of Hawaiian and Chinese descent, while his mother, Patricia, was an English showgirl and costume designer. Their union was a brief flare of passion, more chaos than stability, and within a few short years his father was gone, absent, leaving only scars and questions. Abandonment came early, and it would be the first of many shadows to trail Keanu's steps. The Reeves family drifted across continents, from Lebanon to Sydney, from Sydney to New York, and finally to Toronto. Keanu grew up as the perpetual outsider, always in motion but never settled. He struggled in school, not because of lack of intelligence, but because of dyslexia, which made reading a battlefield. Teachers often misread him, dismissing him as lazy, disruptive, or distracted, when in reality his mind simply processed the world differently. Where others saw a failure, Keanu saw escape routes. Ice hockey became one of them, where he earned the nickname The Wall for his skill as a goalie. On the ice, he was fast, fearless, and unyielding. But fate struck again. An injury robbed him of his athletic dreams. It is here that the story of Keanu Reeves begins to resemble the archetype of a reluctant hero. The young man stripped of options, left wandering, until destiny places in his path a calling he cannot ignore. For Keanu, that calling was acting. He found himself in small roles in Canadian television and stage plays, his face striking, his presence magnetic yet understated. He was not the loudest voice in the room, nor the most polished performer, but there was something in his eyes. A depth, a searching, a vulnerability that could not be faked. Casting directors noticed, and soon Hollywood came calling. The 1980s were a strange time in cinema, an era of extremes. Action heroes built like gods, comedies painted in neon excess, and dramas searching for authenticity in the chaos. Keanu emerged in the middle of it all, unshaped by Hollywood's obsession with image, carrying instead an aura of sincerity. His first breakthrough came in 1986 with River's Edge, a haunting drama about disaffected youth grappling with the aftermath of a murder. Critics saw in him a rawness that spoke to something deeper, a generation disillusioned yet desperate for meaning. But Keanu's real collision with cultural consciousness arrived not in tragedy, but in comedy. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 1989, turned him into a household name. With his surfer dude cadence, wide-eyed innocence, and comedic timing, he became the very embodiment of a generation's goofball optimism. The film was light, silly, almost ridiculous, and yet it resonated. Here was Keanu, playing a boy destined to write music that would unite the world, and in some strange way, art seemed to be foreshadowing life. The world laughed with Bill and Ted, but Hollywood laughed at Keanu. He was typecast as the airhead, the beautiful but empty shell. Industry insiders sneered, critics dismissed him, and whispers spread that he would never rise above the woe stereotype. But this underestimation became one of Keanu's greatest weapons. For in every role that followed, he proved them wrong. The early 1990s carved the true foundation of Keanu's legend. Point Break, 1991, saw him step into the skin of an FBI agent opposite Patrick Swayze's magnetic bank-robbing surfer. It was a film drenched in adrenaline, philosophy, and sun-soaked violence. And it showed Keanu's range. He could be the hero, the conflicted seeker, the man caught between duty and freedom. His line delivery, often mocked, suddenly became an advantage. Every word sounded unpolished, human, uncalculated. He was not a Hollywood machine. He was real. Then came My Own Private Idaho, 1991. Gus Van Sant's aching meditation on loneliness, desire, and survival. Alongside his closest friend River Phoenix, Keanu delivered a performance that silenced even the harshest critics. The film was a mirror, a glimpse into lives lived on the edge of society, fragile yet defiant. To this day, many consider it his most vulnerable work. And with it, Keanu Reeves became something larger than Hollywood's expectations. An actor unafraid to step into the margins, unafraid to carry the weight of other people's pain. But fate was never far behind. River Phoenix, his brother in spirit, died of a drug overdose in 1993, collapsing outside the Viper Room in Hollywood. The world mourned, but Keanu mourned more deeply than most. His grief was private, silent, but it was written across his face in every photograph, in every interview. He had lost not just a friend, but a part of himself. The pattern of loss, seeded in childhood, was repeating. And yet, even in mourning, Keanu kept moving forward. Hollywood offered him another transformation in 1994. Speed. Paired with Sandra Bullock, Keanu became the everyman action star. He was not Schwarzenegger or Stallone, not larger than life, but a man you could believe in, a man you could imagine standing beside you in crisis. The film was a box office explosion, and suddenly Keanu Reeves was no longer the punchline. He was the future. But what set Keanu apart was not just the roles he chose, it was the roles he refused. When Speed 2 was offered with a massive paycheck attached, he walked away. He chose instead to tour with his band Dog Star and to play Hamlet on stage in Winnipeg. The media mocked him relentlessly, but behind the mockery was a truth. Keanu was not interested in money, nor in fame, nor in chasing Hollywood's approval. He was interested in art, in experience, in the pursuit of something genuine. The late 1990s would bring him face to face with the role that defined an era. The Matrix, 1999. At first, Keanu was not the studio's top choice. Will Smith turned it down, others hesitated. But when Keanu read the script, he saw not just science fiction, but philosophy, destiny, and liberation. He committed completely. He trained in martial arts for months, endured physical pain, and threw himself into a world of wires and impossible stunts. And when The Matrix arrived, it did not just succeed, it redefined cinema. The bullet time sequences, the cyberpunk aesthetic, the existential questions of reality versus illusion, all became cultural phenomena. And at the center of it was Keanu Reeves. No longer the airhead, no longer the lucky underdog, but Neo, the One. Yet even in the glow of success, darkness returned. Around this time, Keanu met Jennifer Syme, an actress and personal assistant. They fell deeply in love, and in 1999, they were expecting a child. But their daughter Ava was stillborn. The grief shattered them, and though they tried to heal, their relationship could not survive the weight of loss. In 2001, Jennifer herself was killed in a car accident. Keanu was left alone again, alone, but not destroyed. He carried his grief quietly, refusing to let it turn him bitter. Where others would crumble, Keanu chose resilience. He worked, he gave, he endured. He became known not just for his films, but for his humanity. The stories of him giving away millions of his Matrix earnings to special effects teams, of riding the subway humbly, of sitting with homeless strangers, of listening instead of speaking. By the dawn of the new millennium, Keanu Reeves was no longer just an actor. He was a paradox, a star who rejected stardom, a man who had endured endless tragedy yet radiated kindness, a cultural figure both ordinary and extraordinary. And this was only the beginning, because every triumph of his career in the years to come would not just be about cinema, it would be about survival, about how a man can lose almost everything and still rise again and again, until even the world itself can no longer ignore the legend he has become. Hollywood is not a forgiving place. For every actor who rises, there are hundreds swallowed by the machine, consumed, discarded, forgotten. But Keanu Reeves has always existed at a distance from that machine, orbiting it rather than living within it. He was a star, yes, but he was never entirely Hollywood star. Perhaps that is why he survived when others would have crumbled. The early 2000s carried him into one of the boldest experiments in film history, The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. Sequels of that scale were destined for controversy. How do you expand a story that has already defined a generation? How do you follow perfection with anything less? Audiences were divided, critics torn between admiration and disappointment. But through it all, Keanu remained steady. His devotion to the Wachowskis' vision was complete, and his presence grounded the chaos. Neo was not just a character anymore. He was a vessel for questions larger than cinema. Fate, control, freedom, sacrifice. Even amid the spectacle, Keanu remained unchanged. Where most actors would bask in the limelight, he was often found slipping quietly away from red carpets, riding his motorcycle down long roads, disappearing into anonymity. He had money, yes, but money had no hold on him. In interviews, he seemed almost bemused by wealth, as though it were a strange burden he had never asked for. Stories spread of his generosity, how he gave away a vast portion of his Matrix salary to the stunt teams and special effects crews who had made the impossible possible. "Money is the last thing I think about," he once said, and he meant it. As the decade unfolded, Hollywood seemed unsure what to do with Keanu. He floated between genres, from the supernatural noir of Constantine, 2005, to the romantic melancholy of The Lake House, 2006. Each role carried his unmistakable stamp, a gentleness threaded with quiet steel. Yet critics remained divided. Some accused him of wooden delivery, of lacking the range of his peers, but audiences sensed something else. That Keanu was not performing in the way others did. His art was not about transformation into someone else, but about presence, about allowing his own wounded soul to filter into whatever role he touched. By the late 2000s, Keanu had become a paradox in Hollywood. A superstar without scandal, a leading man without ego, a celebrity who seemed more like a wanderer than an icon. And then, without warning, he became something else entirely, a symbol. It began with a single photograph in 2010. Keanu was captured sitting alone on a bench in New York, eating a sandwich. His shoulders slouched, his face weary, his gaze cast down. The internet seized on it instantly. Memes exploded across forums and social media, labeling him Sad Keanu. At first, it was a joke, but like all things Keanu, the joke transformed into something deeper. People began to project their own sorrows onto that image, to see in him not just sadness, but resilience. He became a vessel again, not of cinematic destiny this time, but of human vulnerability. The meme did not humiliate him, it humanized him. And Keanu, true to his nature, responded not with anger or defensiveness, but with humility. "You can't stop the internet," he said with a smile, "and maybe it makes people feel less alone." In those few words, he revealed what so many already felt, that Keanu Reeves was not just a star, but a mirror for the rest of us, carrying wounds we recognized in ourselves. Yet the story was not finished. In fact, it was only preparing for one of the greatest resurrections in cinematic history. In 2014, a relatively modest action film titled John Wick was released. On the surface, it seemed like another genre piece, a retired hitman seeking vengeance after the death of his beloved dog. But John Wick was more than a revenge story. It was a parable of grief, of violence as expression, of love carried through pain. And at its heart was Keanu Reeves, delivering a performance of brutal elegance and haunting sadness. Audiences connected instantly. They saw in Wick a reflection of Keanu himself. A man who had lost everything yet kept moving forward. A man driven not by fame or fortune, but by love, loyalty, and memory. The action was breathtaking, the world-building intricate, but it was Keanu's humanity that made the film unforgettable. John Wick was not invincible. He was wounded, weary, mortal. And that made him mythic. The success of John Wick reignited Keanu's career, transforming him from a fading star into a cultural phenomenon once again. Sequels followed, each expanding the legend, each deepening the character, and each reminding the world why Keanu Reeves mattered. His name, once doubted, once mocked, was now spoken with reverence. He was no longer just Neo, no longer just the dude from Bill and Ted. He was a force that refused to fade. The internet, which had once laughed at sad Keanu, now embraced him as a saint-like figure. Stories of his kindness spread like wildfire. Tales of him giving up his seat on the subway, of stopping to sign autographs for hours, of donating quietly to children's hospitals and cancer research. In an industry addicted to spectacle and scandal, Keanu's humility became its own revolution. He was proof that one could endure tragedy without becoming bitter, proof that kindness could be strength. Even as his legend grew, Keanu himself seemed almost unaware of it. He still lived simply, often alone, often riding the same motorcycles he had loved for decades. He avoided social media, resisted Hollywood's cult of personality, and carried himself with the same gentle awkwardness that had marked him from the beginning. In the late 2000s, something extraordinary happened. Keanu Reeves became an internet folk hero. He appeared in video games like Cyberpunk 2077, voiced animated characters, starred in memes, interviews, and fan encounters that went viral instantly. He was celebrated not just for his art, but for his existence. People called him the internet's boyfriend. They cheered his humility at E3 when he called fans breathtaking. He had become more than an actor. He had become a cultural archetype, the wounded yet unbreakable hero, the gentle giant, the man who could lose everything and still choose kindness. But beneath the memes and movies, Keanu remained what he had always been, a man who carried silence. He rarely spoke of his losses, rarely revealed his inner world, but those who watched closely could see it in his eyes, in the pauses between words. He was not pretending to be strong, he simply was. Strength for him was not noise, it was persistence. As the 2020s arrived, the world found itself fractured, weary, searching for light. And in that landscape, Keanu Reeves stood as something rare, an authentic presence in an age of performance. He was the actor who never pretended to be untouchable, the celebrity who never wanted to be one, the man who had endured the unbearable and emerged not unscarred, but unbroken. There are legends born from myth, and there are legends born from truth. Keanu Reeves belongs to the latter. His life has not been a fairy tale. It has been a series of falls and rises, of griefs too heavy for most to bear, of triumphs carved from silence. And through it all, he has remained what his name foretold, a cool breeze over the mountains. A reminder that even in the darkest valleys, there is strength and gentleness, and even in the fiercest storms, there is grace and endurance. Keanu Reeves does not chase legacy, but legacy has found him. And perhaps that is the greatest truth of all, that sometimes the most extraordinary legends are the ones who never sought to be legends at all. There comes a moment in every story when words are no longer enough. Keanu Reeves has lived that kind of story, one that refuses to be contained by headlines or box office numbers, one that bleeds far beyond cinema. Today, he walks through life not as a man chasing immortality, but as someone who has already earned it without trying. When he appears on a red carpet, there is no arrogance in his step. When he speaks, there is no pretense of wisdom, only honesty. And when he disappears into the quiet, into a ride on his motorcycle, into a dinner shared without cameras, into a silence that belongs only to him, the world is reminded that he is still human. It is that humanity that makes him unforgettable. He is not untouchable, not flawless, not beyond pain. He is a man who has endured abandonment, grief, ridicule, and loss, yet has chosen again and again to respond with kindness. He is living proof that gentleness can outlast cruelty, that humility can outshine fame, that compassion can be more powerful than myth. Keanu Reeves does not need monuments or statues. He does not need the hollow praise of an industry addicted to its own reflection. His monument is written in the quiet moments, in the strangers who carry stories of his kindness, in the audiences who leave his films not only entertained, but moved, in the internet that turned a single photo of him eating lunch into a symbol of shared loneliness and resilience. When future generations look back, they may not remember the numbers, the premieres, or even the reviews. They will remember the man who lived gently, who carried pain without passing it on, who showed the world that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it simply endures. In an age where everything is loud, Keanu Reeves is the silence that speaks louder than all of it. And perhaps that is his final gift. Not the films, not the fame, not the myth, but the reminder that no matter how much you lose, no matter how much the world takes, it is still possible to live with grace. The story of Keanu Reeves does not end here, because men like him do not end. They live on in the people they touch, in the compassion they ignite, in the legends whispered long after they are gone. He is not just a star, he is not just a name, he is Keanu Reeves, the man who refused to break.